Hey, Cloud Gurus, welcome to the live stream event where we're going to be walking through the AZ-400 Designing and Implementing Microsoft DevOps Solutions exam. So you might be wondering, what is this AZ-400 exam and walkthrough and why we're hosting it? The AZ-400 exam walkthrough is our way to help you fellow students feel ready and prepared to sit the AZ-400 exam. All of our hosts are going to have extensive knowledge within DevOps and have, in fact, built a course on AZ-400 and would like you to take the time to help prepare and answer the questions that you might have before sitting the exam. So let's go over a breakdown of today's event. We're going to be providing more details about who the exam is for, giving more details on what's inside of the exam, going through some sample questions with explanations and exam tips, and finally, an interactive session where the hosts are going to answer the questions that you have about the exam. We're going to be showing questions as close to what's on the exam without breaking the Microsoft Terms of Service. We also have a practice exam that we highly recommend that you check out prior to taking the real test. This is an absolutely interactive live stream, and if at any point in time you have questions, please feel free to put them in the live chat and we'll get to them by the end of the session. My name is Mark Mikula, and I'm a training architect for A Cloud Guru. I've been in IT for 13 years, and I've been working closely with Microsoft products my entire life. And I'm going to be one of your co-hosts for the evening. I'll let the other co-host introduce himself. Matt?
Hey everyone, my name is Matthew Ulasien, and welcome to our live stream today covering the AZ-400 exam, which is a pretty challenging exam. However, it is very doable. Before we jump on into it, how has your week been, Mark? And especially, what are your plans for this upcoming Halloween?
Oh, fantastic. My week has been my week has been absolutely fantastic. I'm working on a brand new course, and I'm really excited about it. And for Halloween, my little one has decided to dress up as Belle, Princess Belle from Beauty and the Beast. What about yours?
That's awesome. Our daughter has decided that she wants to dress up as a unicorn this year for Halloween. She actually,
Oh, unicorn.
yeah, she actually has some unicorn pajamas, so it's pretty convenient. You just wear your costume and go out trick or treating, and hey, you're ready for bed when you come back home. So that works out really conveniently.
Oh, that is super convenient. I
Two
love
for
it. I
one.
love unicorns too. Yeah.
But planning on getting lots of candy and all that good stuff.
I love candy. I'm diabetic, but
Oh.
I still
Well,
absolutely
your
love
kids will love
candy.
it.
I it's just the one night of the year that I'll give myself a little bit of extra, like extra candy and make
Little extra
myself a
woo
little
woo.
bit happy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump on into it. Okay, so jumping on into it from a big picture perspective for preparing for the AZ-400, let's start off by talking about what exactly is the Microsoft DevOps Engineer Expert Certification, which is primarily focused on the AZ-400 exam. In brief, the DevOps Engineer certification, which also includes the AZ-400 exam, along with a couple other prerequisites, proves that you are able to demonstrate proficiency deploying and managing applications within Azure DevOps and the Azure platform in general. Now, be aware that this single sentence definition actually includes a really wide range of skills that we're going to cover here in just a moment. Next, where exactly does this AZ-400 exam and the DevOps Engineer certification in general fit with the other Azure certifications? First, you really need to be aware that this is an expert level certification, which, in my opinion, is also matched by the general difficulty of the AZ-400 exam. It assumes that you have prior experience working with Microsoft Azure, especially working with an Azure DevOps organization. Second, the full blown official Microsoft DevOps Engineer certification, in addition to the AZ-400 exam, which is what we're focusing on in this live stream, also requires you that you have passed either the Azure Administrator or the Azure Developer Associate level certifications as well. One or the other of those associate level certifications, either the administrator or the developer exam, is a hard prerequisite in addition to passing the AZ-400 exam to be officially recognized by Microsoft as an official certified Microsoft DevOps engineer expert.
Awesome. Let's talk about the actual skills being tested as well. We have, it's going to be 150 minutes. Total number of questions about between 40 and 60. It kind of really depends on what Microsoft gives you, but it means you'll have approximately 2 to 3 minutes per question. So if you're able to, I'm going to recommend more difficult questions for you to be skipped and to come back later. The type of questions are what's shown on the slide below, and it's going to be a combination of developing instrumentation strategy, which is around 5 or 10%, not too much, developing a site reliability engineering or SRE strategy, also sitting kind of light at 5 to 10%. Then we have a security and developing a security and compliance plan between 10 and 15%, and then developing and facilitating communication and collaboration, also 10 or 15%. These are getting a little bit more medium level stress there. And then we have managing source control sitting at 10 or 15%. And then the biggest, beefiest amount that you're going to need to have as a prerequisite knowledge for this course is going to be defining and implementing continuous integration, sitting at 20 to 25%. It's really important that you spend a lot of time understanding, implementing continuous integration inside of your environments, or have a good knowledge on doing so. And then finally, defining and implementing a continuous delivery and release management strategy, also sitting at 10 to 15%. Can you go to the next slide for me?
Sure, certainly.
So, like I said, it's going to be 150 minutes, 40 to 60 questions, and 2 to 3 minutes per question. If you have any difficulty getting through a question, it's going to be recommended that you skip that question and come back to it later. Then there might be a couple of questions that might not be able to be gone back and reviewed, and those exam questions will actually indicate which ones those are.
So very good. So for the bulk of this live stream, what we're going to do to help you prepare is we're going to be running through a number of example questions as you would expect on the live exam itself. As Mark previously mentioned, these aren't going to be direct copies of the exam questions, obviously for NDA purposes, but they're going to be a reasonable facsimile or a reasonable representation of what you could see, including many questions that are quite wordy or scenario driven. In other words, there's going to be a lot of text for you to work through, which is something that you will also want to be prepared for when you jump into the live exam. So what we're going to do is we're going to be running through a number of sample questions that come through our own practice exam that we make available on A Cloud Guru. And the format for this is going to be in which we're going to read through a question. We're then going to give our audience about 2 minutes to go ahead and answer that question in chat with what they think the answer is going to be. And then after about 2 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and go through the relevant pieces of information in the question that helps you get to the answer, rule out the incorrect answers, and of course result in the correct answer at the end with a full explanation as part of the process. So before we jump into our actual live questions, we're going to go ahead and do a quick sample question just to kind of show what this example is going to be like. This is going to be a really fun, basic, easy question, just kind of see what we're working with. But for our little bit of a silly sample question, let's say, for example, we want to ask what number is between 1 and 10. I'd give you about 30 seconds to answer here. And of course, go ahead and type your answers in chat just to make sure our chat functionality is working. And then we will go ahead and go through the correct answer. And I'll keep a watch on time here on my phone here.
Awesome, quick 30 seconds. I know this is it feels like a silly question, but if you're ready to, get prepared and start answering the rest of our sample questions with this, go ahead, throw your information inside of the live chat, reason why you think it's right or wrong, and as well as the letter on which one you have correct or incorrect. And we'll be walking through what's correct or incorrect when we go through the live sample exam questions as well.
All right, 30 seconds is up. Hopefully this is a good warm-up question for everyone and just kind of showing the format we'd be working with. We are highlighting the relevant pieces of information from the question. We're looking specifically for a number. It needs to be between the numbers of 1 and 10. Therefore, 12, 18, and cat are incorrect, and 3 is our correct answer. Okay, hopefully that was a little bit of a fun warm-up. Let's go ahead and jump into the actual questions themselves. And you're going to notice they're going to be a little bit longer than our example question here. Okay, buckle up. Let's go ahead and jump into question 1 of our exam prep. Now, I'm not going to read the question at first. I'm just going to go ahead and put it on the screen, start the timer, and at about 2 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and quickly read through the question and start narrowing down the answers from there. Let's jump on into the first one, and time is starting now. I'm curious to see what some of the answers we have here in chat.
I would have picked cat for the first sample question.
That's a tough one. Cat's usually a correct answer most of the times if you got to guess anyway.
That's true.
When in doubt, pick cat. Okay, we got about 30 seconds left. Looks like answers are kind of evenly spread all over the place. Very interesting.
Barry Z said he's just about ready to sit his AZ-400 exam. Hopefully he gets these questions right too.
Your timing is impeccable. Time is about up. All right, that is 2 minutes. Let's see what the correct answer is. Let's go ahead and walk through the relevant bits in the question. So there are, in this question, 3 main pieces of information that are relevant to getting the correct answer. One is we need to choose a source control configuration. The source control configuration needs to be centralized access in nature, and this source control needs to reside on an on-premises virtual machine. So with those 3 pieces of information, we can first rule out GitHub Teams. Now, GitHub Teams is a team management function built into GitHub, but GitHub Teams itself is not a source control configuration, so we can strike out that answer. Next, we need a centralized source control method. By comparison, Git, or specifically Azure Repos Git, is by nature a decentralized source control method, so Git is not centralized, so we can go ahead and throw that one out, which then leaves either Subversion or Azure Repos using TFVC, which is short for Team Foundation Version Control. Now, both of those are a centralized source control method. However, Azure Repos using TFVC cannot run on an on-premises machine. Rather, it only is hosted or operates purely within Azure Repos inside of an Azure DevOps organization, not on-premises. So based on those 3 highlighted pieces of information, Subversion, which is a not quite as commonly used but still existing centralized source control method, can run on on-premises virtual machines and anywhere else for that matter. Based on that info, that is our only correct answer. So the answer is a Subversion. Jumping on to our next tip. Mark, go ahead.
Absolutely. So the exam tip that we have here is watch out for distractors. There is a lot of different types of, Microsoft specifically loves to give you a whole bunch of text, and a lot of that text can potentially lead you in an incorrect direction. And it's really important in order to take a look at some of those very key features, just like we just showed on the first example question there, that that actually are going to help us lead in the right direction. And it's so easy in order to see the wrong thing or to make assumptions essentially about what you're looking at and then try to gum from your own particular answer. Make sure you read the whole thing, take out all the distractors, and just deal with the information that you have.
Let's see if we can see this in action. On to our next question, question 2. As soon as I get my timer ready, starting right now. Okay, we got about a minute left. Getting some pretty consistent answers from Twitch and YouTube. We will see if that is correct here in about 45 seconds.
You know, Matt, it's awesome to see people that are answering that they're about to sit this exam.
Well, hopefully we can help everyone else out. All right, looks like time's about up. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's see if, looks like both Twitch and YouTube almost universally answered C. Let's see if they're right. All right, so let's go ahead and break this one down again. There is a lot of information in this question. I forgot to read the previous one. I'll read this one out. So in this scenario, we are creating an alert using Azure Monitor with the following condition, that whenever an activity log has an event with the category as administrative, signal name is delete resource group, level is informational, and status is succeeded. Based on that info, what will trigger the alert? Now, the key piece of information that we care about is deleting resource group being the signal and status as succeeded. So we need to know, essentially, were we able to successfully delete the resource group? The other info is good to know, but not ultimately relevant to the question. So with that in mind, our correct answer is a successful attempt to delete any resource group, which looks like both Twitch and YouTube got correct. So awesome job, everyone. Hooray! We need like a little confetti emote. I don't know. Anyway. All right, Mark, want to go ahead and jump into our next exam tip.
So our next exam tip is to understand how services work and affect other services. Monitoring and site reliability engineering, there's a whole bunch of different pieces here that we're going to, you need to understand kind of the whole of how everything kind of works together and how not only that service is on, like Azure Monitor, but you need to understand the other pieces of the puzzle of what Azure Monitor also connects to and affects other services.
So I wonder if our next question is going to involve Azure services interacting with each other. Let's find out. Jumping into question number 3, I'm going to go.
We got a cool comment from Alex saying that he's got his AZ-400 booked for Sunday, and his first cloud job is on Monday as an Azure administrator. So no pressure there for you.
Awesome.
Good job, Alex.
Hey, jump on into it. And the 104 is a pretty fun exam. I think that's like the perfect ramp up to becoming an Azure administrator. I took the 103 last year. I'm sure the 104 is pretty similar to it. Hey, good luck, Alex. Congratulations on the new job as well. All right, question 3 that may or may not be related to our exam tip. 2 minutes and go. All right, got about a minute left. I'm curious to see what kind of answers we have here. I think this one's a little bit more challenging than the previous question. Okay, got about 10 seconds. We're going to go ahead and see who is correct. It looks like we're getting most answers kind of all over the place. Quite a number of people are saying C, so there goes my alarm right there. All right, let's go ahead and find out what the answer is. First of all, our question is, we have an Azure DevOps project. In this project, we are going to deploy an Azure Kubernetes service in a release pipeline. Our Kubernetes service cluster and one Azure service needs to securely connect to another Azure service in Azure Container Registry. Based on that, what authentication resource do we need to configure? Let's go ahead and pull in our relevant pieces of information. We have two different Azure services, an AKS cluster and the Azure Container Registry service. We need to securely connect one service to another, and we're specifically focused on the authentication resource that we want to work with. Based on that, let's go ahead and throw out our incorrect answers. First incorrect answer is a service account. Microsoft does not recommend utilizing a service account to grant access. A group membership role is more focused on permissions to a resource, but is not an authentication resource itself. And also, Microsoft does not recommend using app registration, or it cannot. Let me rephrase that. Microsoft states that an app registration will not grant AKS access to the Azure Container Registry service. With that in mind, a service principal is our authentication method that will allow you to authenticate one Azure service securely over to the other. So based on that, answer C, service principal, is our correct answer. Congratulations to everyone who got it correct.
Yeah, fantastic for the people that answered C. If you answered A, B, or D, not a problem. This is a security question. Not everybody likes security. I personally, I see security as a way in order to enhance the ability or I guess remove the ability in order for bad people to access bad things. But it's not exactly as fun as developing the continuous integration and continuous deployment roles. But service principals are part of managed identities, and this goes back to that very same exam tick that we just had, where you are going to need to understand how other services interact with other ones. In this case, Azure Kubernetes services to the Azure Container Registry. And service principal is definitely a managed identity. You definitely don't want service accounts because those have passwords. And service principals or managed identities, passwords are managed by Azure Active Directory.
One other observation I wanted to throw out, especially regarding the difficulty, especially with this and other questions, is we mentioned before this is an expert level exam. And in my opinion, one of the more challenging aspects of working with DevOps, regardless of your cloud vendor, is that you're taking effectively two very different career paths. You got the developer side or the dev, and the ops side, which is the operations, and you're essentially just kind of smashing both of them together. So DevOps, whether you're working with Microsoft, Google, on-premises, whatever, there's an assumed level of knowledge of both the developer side and the operations side, which also includes security, which most people, outside of maybe a very few unicorns, actually have deep knowledge in both of them at the same time. So DevOps is hard for everyone because there's probably at least one half of that equation that's just completely foreign to you, including myself and Mark. It's a really hard topic to cover. You're not going to become an expert with this overnight. So you just got to find those little gaps when it comes to security, operations, development, working with Visual Studio, according to Microsoft, and just lots of ground to cover with that. So don't feel bad if you missed it. We're not perfect either. I guarantee you that.
No, no. Matt, which side are you on? Which side did you come from before going into DevOps?
Operations side. So I'm all about networking and firewalls and all that good stuff. And I'd like to tell people I can pretend to be a developer when I have to, which has been quite often here at A Cloud Guru. But it's definitely the learning side as opposed to the previous expertise. But I will say,
Absolutely.
though, it is more fun to jump into the development side. I've gotten a little bit more proficient with Python over the years. Not a full on software engineer yet. Maybe someday in the future. We'll see. All right, let's go ahead and jump into our final prep question. Now, heads up, this is going to be a really long and wordy question. In fact, it may take you an entire 2 minutes just to read through everything. Again, you may see this on the live exam as well, so we're giving you a little bit of an advance heads up. Let's go ahead and jump on into it, and our timer starts now. Now, looking at chat here, I'm curious for those of you who are well versed in admin and developer sides. First of all, that's impressive. I'm curious how long.
Yes.
I'm curious how long it took you to be fully proficient in both those sides. At I guess what most people would regard like a pretty deep level. Kind of curious if you'd be willing to share that. All right, we got about 30 seconds left. Chat may be finished reading through the questions and answers here.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Okay, time is up. We have a little bit of a spread here. I'm going to go ahead and read through the question real quick. I'm not going to read through the answers. I'll take another 5 minutes. And Mark, if you want to go ahead and talk through it once we get to that point, go ahead and jump on in. So in this scenario, we're using Azure DevOps build pipelines to automatically test checked-in code. In the setup, we have 3 Azure virtual machines configured as part of an agent pool. We plan to use PowerShell desired state configuration on our build servers. As part of the setup, the security team has expressed interest in managing configuration drift and would like ongoing reports on management of the machines. Based on this, which steps should you take using the least amount of administrative effort? So, Mark, you want to go ahead and talk through this pretty wordy question here for a moment?
Absolutely. And honestly, even though it is a very wordy question and there's a whole bunch of wordy answers, there really is kind of a more simplistic explanation here. And the fact is that the security team has expressed interest in managing configuration drift. And because of that, they'd also like ongoing reports on the management of the machines. Now, technically, every single one of these methods can actually work for the initial desired state configuration of your build servers. However, the report server and reports on the management of the machines and the configuration drift is a key aspect of it. And the other key aspect is they have also expressed interest in managing that configuration drift with their own machines. And because of that, all the other ones as managing push servers, configuring as DSC pull servers, everything other than enabling Azure Automation State configuration does not include any of the reporting aspects and the eventual other pulling in other machines in order to manage that configuration drift as well. So Azure Automation State Configuration is going to be able to generate those regular reports for the security team, and it's also going to be the best solution in managing configuration drift on a larger scale that could potentially occur in the future.
So, based on that, looks like D is our correct answer. Congratulations to everyone who got that very obtuse question correct.
That's right. So that brings us to our last exam tip of the day, and that is even if there are big questions, big problems, break down the problems and solve them logically using the relevant information. If you had taken the time and just kind of pieced those as each one of those different sentences as just problems to the puzzle, and then just took out anything that didn't make sense, anything that doesn't actually help solve the problem, then you would have noticed that there is report servers, that there is going to be reporting that are going to be required, and then kind of piece that to each of the different answers. Okay, so security team needs reporting. So which one of these solutions provides the reports? And then finally, the security team also is interested um, in managing configuration drift for their own machines. Which one of these solutions would be able to do that as well?
Excellent. So, I guess this is the part where you get to ask us anything that you want.
Absolutely. So great job, everyone that participated in any of the questions, the sample questions that we had. It is time for our Q&A session, so we're going to answer any questions that you might have about the exam in DevOps, and we're going to help provide any type of answers and feedback that we see that we see inside of the live chat stream. I do have a question for you while we're waiting for those questions to come in. Um, Matt, how much time do you think it's going to take in order to prepare for the AZ-400 exam?
So, the only actually correct answer is also the most frustrating one in it depends. Not very helpful. So, it completely depends on your previous level of experience working specifically with Azure, also working specifically with different DevOps processes, how well versed you are working with Git or GitHub or just a Git workflow, working with the CI/CD process. I would say even if you've had experience with DevOps but not working specifically with Azure DevOps, specifically Azure pipelines, and the YAML format that they need for the different automated processes, there could be a little bit of a learning curve on there. So with all those bajillion factors thrown in, I would say if you have previous experience working with Azure, working with an Azure DevOps organization, and working with Azure pipelines, I'm going to guesstimate maybe about a month to a month and a half of preparation. With that said, I would say that if you do not have experience working with, well, if you don't have experience working with Azure, period, you should probably be starting with the Azure 104 exams or 204 developer exams first. Again, that's like the prerequisite for just the basics. If you have experience with Azure but not experience working with DevOps organization, or you haven't really worked with a GitHub workflow that much, I would say throw in about at least maybe another half a month of prep time, maybe about 2.5 months. Again, very rough estimates. Everyone is different, but that would be a rough idea of depending on your experience level of how long it takes to get up to speed.
Awesome, fantastic. I do have another question for you. What was kind of like a couple of curveball subjects that you had to specifically prepare for when you took it?
The biggest curveball for me, and this is probably because I didn't have that much personal experience acting in the Microsoft developer workflow, there was a surprising number of questions testing specifically on working with Visual Studio in directly integrated with Azure DevOps, such as working with package feeds and other questions like that. So it's kind of one of those, unless you've had the specific experience doing that, well, it's something that got completely out of left field. Fortunately, we covered those a little bit of one-off scenarios like working with Visual Studio, how to authenticate Visual Studio to your DevOps pipeline, working with package feeds and stuff like that in our course. But I would say that is something I definitely did not expect my first time going into it. I would also say another bit of a curveball is a little bit of the difference between how different cloud vendors approach working with DevOps. I worked on the Google Cloud DevOps Engineer certification last year, the course for that. And by contrast, Google is all about Kubernetes for everything. Everything's in containers, everything is on Kubernetes, so the entire DevOps course or exam is all around Kubernetes. By comparison, I don't think there's a single mention of Kubernetes outside of working with the AKS servers on the entirety of the Microsoft exam. Everything was working with Visual Studio, working with different package feeds, and not a very Kubernetes focused workflow. Both obviously work, but if you've had a DevOps experience with one cloud vendor, it may be very different going to the other one based on what they want to stress or what they want to essentially highlight with their own services.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. We do have a lot of questions regarding, you know, the backgrounds and the other exams that people have taken and the approximate time in order to answer for the exam. So the first one was, is it good to go for the if they don't have a development background, is it good to go for the AZ-500 after the 104? And the AZ-500 is the developer associate or the developer certification. Should they go with that before pursuing the 400, or should they stick with the 400?
I would not say it's required. So, ironically, I'm actually studying for the AZ-500 myself, just as for my own knowledge sake at the
Oh, I
moment,
didn't know that.
and I'm doing that after the 400. I would say I would say the security concepts of the 104 are sufficient for the 400. Obviously, the 500, which is the security administrator certification, will cover the prerequisite material. However, for specifically a 400 perspective, it's a bit overkill. Now, if you're going for the 500 anyway, hey, by all means, go for it. But I would say that the security aspects tested in the 104 are sufficient for the 400, at least in my own experience.
Perfect. Our next question is, I passed the 104, the 303 and 304, and the 500. What is the approximate time in order to prepare for the exam? And I know that answer is going to be prefaced with it depends.
It depends. So those are the
That's right.
administrators. So I believe that's the administrator and the architect, which is the exact same route I went. So very similar to my own route. So it seems like the operation side you have pretty well. You would want to pay special attention to Azure Monitor and Logging, which is going to be the main operations focus aspect of the 400 exam in addition to the security stuff. Sounds like you might be a little bit lighter on the developer side, which also matches my experience as well. So it would take some more time to do that. Um, Kind of in relation to another question, I wouldn't say you'd have to do both the developer and the administrator exam, but just realize what half you're weaker in and double down on that side of the fence. So for myself, I had to get up to speed with how you do stuff in Visual Studio, how package feeds work, especially when working with Azure DevOps pipelines, and a lot of stress on the Git development workflow as well. Get really, really, really comfortable with Git commands. You working with GitHub, just Git in general. On ACG, we have a number of courses just working with Git. Regardless of what vendor you're working on, there's going to be a lot of Git specific knowledge you're tested on the 400 exam. So if you're not familiar with Git, you're going to need to get familiar with Git, which is a great experience anyway, because that opens up all sorts of fun stuff you can do, whether you are an experienced software developer or not. So, short answer, I would say spend about a month doubling down on the developer side of the equation. We cover all the developer focused topics that you need to be concerned about in our 400 course. So, we'll cover the essentials in there, but you may want to expand a little bit beyond that as well.
I'd also say that, for all the people who are either administrator or developer backgrounds, or, is looking for kind of like both of those experiences, we have ACG's platform has a whole bunch of hands-on labs that you can really get into, and especially from a developer standpoint and an administrative one, you can actually get that hands-on experience that I mean, I was missing a lot of hands-on experience when I was first starting out, when I was first starting to learn, and having that was a huge help to me when I was first starting out. A great series of questions is a lot of people are asking whether or not the AZ-104 and the AZ-204, so the administration and the development, should you take like just one or the other or both in order to kind of prepare for this 400 exam or what?
In a perfect world with infinite time and infinite resources, both would give you the best step or the best preparation to take the 400. Obviously, we don't live in a perfect world. I would say if you can get away with taking one or the other, but understand which side you may be weaker. So again, I come from the administrator background. I took the 104 or it's 103 and whatever the last year's version of the architect search were at the time. So development was my weak side. Um, you don't. I would say go ahead and take the one you're most comfortable with, administrator or developer, and then go ahead and double down on the side that you are not comfortable with, especially the topics that we bring up in our 400 course, and get really comfortable with those. If you don't come from a developer background, you know you're not required to be a experienced software engineer to go ahead and pass the exam. Obviously, that would be great, but you do need to know just enough, especially working with Git, working with Visual Studio, getting comfortable with YAML files, especially with Azure Pipeline YAML files. I would like to say just enough to, I don't want to say just enough to get certified, but just enough to have the proficiency on the weaker side of your knowledge set to be able to get
Sure.
past the exam.
Yeah, no, now I came from an operations infrastructure side as well, and I when I got mine, I got my administrator side prerequisite, and the first thing that I did was I immediately I tried to understand how the administrative side worked into DevOps, and then which didn't take very much time at all because I was like, okay, I'm already coming from that background. I already think like that. Now I'm going to spend a lot of my time focused on trying to think like a developer and trying to think about it from a developer's perspective. I tried to completely block out for the rest of my training for this cert. I tried to block out all of the rest of my administrative thought process and try to grasp it from a development perspective. And that actually did a huge amount of wonders in order to help me so that since I already was thinking like an administrator, I had to start thinking like a developer as well and trying to think kind of like both. You know, once I was able to turn it back on, I was feeling comfortable. It took me about a month in order to think solely like a developer from this perspective before I kind of moved forward on that.
One thing I'd like to throw out just a little bit of opinion to piggyback on top of that is if you think about that's really kind of most cloud jobs in general. If you come from an administrator or an operations background, like many of us had, almost any job working with cloud engineering or the cloud in general is going to have some sort of a developer aspect to it. I
Yes.
think that this is, especially like in the next 5 to 10 years, this is going to really separate who is really going to be able to get on the cloud train for like like a better buzz term. Those who are willing and able to bridge their own knowledge gap from the operations to the development side, or even vice versa. Getting into DevOps is a good way to kind of kick you out of the nest in a sense, or force you to start learning both those sides. It's uncomfortable learning the other side of the fence, or learning development when you don't come from a development background, or even vice versa. However, really one guiding aspect that kind of drives us here at A Cloud Guru is getting into that uncomfortable side that you're not comfortable working with is really going to set you up for success, especially with the way everything in technology is going these days, cloud or anything else.
Yeah.
So it's uncomfortable, but you're going to be better off jumping on into it. And and I say that from personal experience as well.
That's true. I absolutely agree with it. Um, are the questions focused on using Visual Studio specific only, or will VS Code be fine? Now, I don't remember anything specifically on VS Code or
Yeah,
Visual Studio.
Visual Studio specific, not Visual Studio Code. So we're talking about setting up authentication with package feeds to authenticate with Azure DevOps. Excellent question. Yes, it's very Visual Studio focused, not VS Code, and you will be tested
Yeah,
specifically on Visual Studio. So big heads up on that. I saw at least two, maybe three questions, at least on my pass through of the exam that tested you on that.
cool.
All
When
right.
I have a great question. Personally, after you get this AZ-400 exam, where would you, Matt? Where would you head next? Like, where is your next step of learning? I mean, you just said AZ-500. Is that where you'd probably go through, or
You know,
how is this going to help?
since I don't work with development day to day, and I just want to become more of a master of the Azure craft, AZ-500 is the next step for me. I was actually going to kind of go
Mhm.
for AZ-500 last year, but just other stuff came up and didn't really quite work out. Security is a big deal anywhere. Security is a useful trait regardless of your background. So AZ-500 is heavy on the security side. I would definitely recommend that. In addition to that, I would start working toward your weaker half. So in case it's the development side. So just in my own free time, when I'm not studying for the AZ-500, I am just going through different Python projects and exercises to like basically a quiz of, hey, try to do this thing in Python, and I try to code it up, and have like a private GitHub repo to kind of keep everything backed up and tracked, and just slowly teaching myself basic development to solve very specific problems, not related to any cloud platform, but just boning up or beefing up that development side of my repertoire. Now,
Awesome.
I'm not expecting to get a job at Microsoft next week, as a Python developer, but
No,
those
no.
skills will still have all sorts of practical application, anything having to do with cloud.
Oh, absolutely. Even the basics are really good tools in order to help kind of like move you forward from understanding a developer mindset.
Yep, definitely.
Now, what else would you use in order to prepare for the exam? Microsoft's got some hands-on labs as well. They also have kind of a rudimentary course that's available. I don't know if it's specifically designed for AZ-400, but it has a lot of really cool pieces. And of course, there's the ACG um, course that we have for AZ-400 as well. What would you be using?
Well, of course, we got to put in the plug here. The AZ-400 course that we did covers these example questions plus many more, and it goes through actual blow-by-blow breakdown of the very wide variety of topics across those knowledge domains on the development side, pipeline side, monitoring, tooling, and all those sides as well. So that we designed that to be your all-in-one, one-stop shop for learning all the exam stuff you got to be prepared for. Outside of that, going hands-on, working with labs. Azure Pipelines has all sorts of very specific things it's great to go hands-on with, and we have a number of labs that go hands-on. For me, hands-on is always my best learning tip. The best
Oh
way to
yeah.
learn the thing is to go do the thing, and in the process of doing the thing, see what works, see how everything interacts, see what doesn't work. Fail repeatedly at a task, and then once you figure it out, you learn how to do the task essentially. So
I
yeah, go with hands-on to get as much practical application as you can.
I am definitely a hands-on person. Um, I in order for me, I mean, I can spend some time like watching something or listening or reading, but when it comes right down to it, actually doing something is how I learn best. I know that's basically how my brain works.
Yep, definitely.
Visual is like the second on the list, but the absolute first one. If you can show me how it works and I can do that myself. That's the biggest piece in order to kind of connect all the dots for me.
Excellent tip. Real quick, one of our viewers, Barry, gave a very important note that the AZ-204 developer exam does not let you take code examples in Python, since we keep talking about Python. Looks like you can only choose between, I forget, is that pronounced C sharp or JavaScript? Do I have
It
that
is C
right?
sharp. Yes.
So if you don't know C sharp or JavaScript, good heads up before you start taking the 204 exam. So good to know. Thanks, Barry.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Barry.
All right. Any other questions before we wrap this thing up?
What is Man, what is the coolest experience that you had while learning AZ-400? It was
Coolest
like a huge,
experience
like,
that I
wow,
had.
that's really cool. I didn't know that.
You know what? I'm a huge fan of automation. I'm not an expert in it, but the DevOps, working with Azure pipelines or any cloud vendor or any DevOps platform, is all about automating all the things. And it's just watching the process coming together of multi-step, complex build and deployment pipelines where you start with some source code and you end with a deployed application, and all the magic happens from beginning to end. That's just fun and cool. There's all sorts of services out there that automate everything, even apart from DevOps stuff. You got like consumer services like If This Then That and Zapier. I know on the Microsoft side they have I think they call it Flow now. I have one with my own little
Mhm.
private domain that takes every attachment in my email and automatically saves them to a OneDrive folder. So all attachments are just automatically put somewhere else. Anything with automation that does stuff for you so you don't have to, I think it's just cool. I mean, that may not be the professional term, but it's just fun stuff to work with. Make robots do all the work for you.
I absolutely agree. Starting with um, a piece of code, and then being able to have it like automatically build and go through all these different processes that could match to your business,
Mm-hmm.
and be able to have a deployed application happen automatically. That is super cool to me. That is something that I used to only dream about when I was first starting out before kind of show my age before cloud was a thing. I mean, I started with Microsoft DOS when I was really young, and to think that that would have like occurred that you could just make a change in code and then have it automatically deploy as
Magic.
soon as you had that code checked in. Yeah, it does feel really magical to me.
Yep. I like to boil down the process of commit code, magic, deployed application. All right.
Yeah, it is fun. I think the funnest thing for me when I was doing a lot of automation and a lot of other process improvements and stuff was taking out the magic and like putting magic on paper and like trying to figure out exactly what makes magic. I know you probably don't know this, Matt, but I actually used to be when I was in high school, I was like trying to do like magician type stuff. I used to be
Awesome.
really into magic and um, figuring out that type of magic and being able to convert it was really awesome for me. And but I always wanted to know how it was done. Every single time I wanted to know. So, and I think they took that with me when I was going into IT. Is I wanted to take that magic and I wanted to be able to produce it so that everybody else sees it as magic, but I have some kind of documentation back there in order to show.
So would you say then that being a DevOps engineer kind of makes you a cloud magician?
I wouldn't. You know what? I would say that. I would say that it
Magic.
does make you kind of like a magician, especially for the people who don't understand how it works. I mean, for the developers that might not understand the whole DevOps processes, all you know is you check out, you check in your code, and then boom,
Yep.
it goes through the approvals, everything happens, and then it goes through. You don't. That's the magic there. And then from the operations side, I mean, just thinking about how that code can just build itself and make all of the servers and all the things that you'd normally administer, and it's just there. That's really it's almost wild to look at for the very first time.
Just to have some fun with this, is it magic or is it actually one giant digital Rube Goldberg machine running behind the scenes?
I think it's both.
It is kind of
I
both,
think
isn't it?
if you don't spend a whole lot of time, trying to look into it, I mean, it's magic. I mean, some people know that all the different like smoke and mirrors that are behind a particular magic trick, so it doesn't feel as magic to them. And then there are people who really just like look at it and say, you know what, it's magic. I'm not even going to question it. It's pretty awesome.
It all just works. And all it takes is YAML files.
That's right.
YAML files is the secret to magic.
It is. It is.
All right, we're
But you
getting a
got
little bit
there.
off the rails here.
We are. That's okay. Do we have any other questions that are coming through?
I don't see any, at least on our feed here. Our good buddy colleague Lars mentioned that when he took
Hi,
204 a
Lars.
couple years ago. Hi, Lars. It was JavaScript, C Sharp, and Python. So I wonder if the most recent version dropped Python. I don't know. I haven't taken the 204. Full disclosure, so I couldn't give you any firsthand knowledge of that one. I was the 103 actually myself for the administrator side.
Oh, nice.
All
I
right.
decided to challenge myself when I was going through, and I did not want it to be easy. I did not want it to be something that I already knew, so I took the developer side instead of the administrator side first.
You are a madman. Love it.
I am. I knew that that was going to be like one of the things that I knew I was going to be struggling with. So I wanted to tackle it. Wanted to be able to just, figure out what I didn't know. Um, and again, that was part of the thinking like a developer mindset, because 13 years of thinking like an automations operations expert. Yeah, let's move over to developer side, see what's going on over there.
Hey, love your attitude and approach. Awesome. Well, I think we are just about out of time. Is that correct? Can someone remind me of that? Oh yeah. So last quick shout out before we wrap things up. We have the AZ-400 course, the one that we just completed, and covers all these different aspects about the exam. It is free until the end of October or November, which is when's the 31st Sunday. It's free through Sunday unless my dates are incorrect.
No, no, it's free through the end of November.
Oh, is
We're
that?
giving everybody a whole month of being
Oh,
able
even
to
better.
access the AZ-400 course. So, thank you. First of all, thank you for everybody for attending. Feel free to check us out on any of our free videos on the ACG platform. And yeah, that AZ-400 course is going to be available for free with an ACG account until the end of November. So we highly encourage you to take a look through. It has a lot of really good, useful content in order to help you prepare for this AZ-400 exam. And if you want to get in contact with us, can you go ahead and flash up our LinkedIn and
Yes.
Twitter accounts up there on the screen?
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. So we both have Twitter, which I actually just signed up to today, and we have a LinkedIn available for that. So if you want to get in contact, our LinkedIn and Twitter accounts are actually up on the screen. And thank you everybody for coming and seeing our live stream. Have a wonderful rest of your day or night, depending on where you are. And as awesome as always, keep being awesome, Cloud Gurus.
Thank y'all for showing up.
Thank you.
Everyone have a good evening, morning, afternoon,
Thank
wherever
you.
you're at.